Unemployment rate climbing up to 32.9% in the first quarter of 2025 further reveals the deepening inequality that exists in the country and to some extent sub-Saharan region as well. The Southern Africa Labour and Development Research Unit's latest book looks at how the labour market, gender inequality, as well as climate change are contributing factors to inequality in the southern region. Let's discuss this now with Deputy Director of that unit, Professor Vimal Ranchhod. Professor, thank you so much for the conversation then as well here. What is it that you think actually causes inequality in African countries? Is it our historical past that are still to bear till this very day?
Surely the histories of each country does matter, and it matters in terms of the infrastructure, it matters in terms of the developmental path that different countries took. And that, of course, affects how our societies function today. So, for example, things like education and skills, which then feed into the labor market, were shaped by our historical processes and the vision that our governments had for our people. So, you can't discount the role of history, but it's not just that. It's also some contemporary factors.
Yeah, let's unpack those contemporary factors then, if you will.
Sure. So, for example, one of the things that's a global effect in the last 15, 20 years is that as technology has shifted, as globalization has occurred, you'll find that in pretty much all countries, the highly skilled people have been getting the majority of the increases in the labor market. And South Africa is no exception, right? So that's not just a South Africa phenomenon, that's a technology and global phenomenon. But it intersects with our history in a country like ours, where the majority of people do not have the types of skills that are being rewarded very well in the market. And so we've got a really high unemployment rate, and then we've got a lot of people who struggle. They go into relatively poor paying jobs, or else they have precarious employment and things like that. And then there's a small sector of people, a small subset of people who work in highly paid industries who have done very well. And these dynamics together lead to a widening of the inequality situation.
It's a situation in itself that has continued to grow, though. And if we're going to find solutions to getting it resolved, it's going to have to take what feels like a step backwards or a massive investment into those that don't have in order to bring them up to par with those that have. But it feels that the more you do that, the more that inequality grows as well. What sense are you getting from it?
Yeah, what we've seen, again, globally in the last approximately 30, 40 years is that in all countries, there's been increasing inequality, right? In all countries that we have lots of data for. And so we are kind of facing a global phenomenon with a tide. Think of it like a tide. The tide has been towards increased inequality. But of course, as you say in our book, and as you just pointed out, there are certain things that would at least help this process to slow down or perhaps reverse. And that would include investment in various forms. So one of the things we do in our book is we talk about the role of health, the role of education, and trying to help youth, because youth have a very particular set of challenges when they try to enter the labor market. And so all of those would be part of a solution, but it is a big and a complex phenomenon. It's not an easy thing, and there's no singular, like, this is the way to solve it either.
It also takes quite a number of years, if not decades. Should we expect ourselves to have been rid of it 30-odd years into our own democracy?
I don't think you can ever get rid of it. Sorry, that sounds very fatalistic, but all countries, no matter which countries, have some level of inequality. Let's say it like that. So even if you go to your very low inequality societies, which are Northern European typically, they still have some inequality. There are richer people and poorer people there. It's just that our magnitudes are so stark that if you look at it statistically, South Africa's is, the highest levels of inequality in the world. So I don't think you could. It's a sensible question to say after 30 years would you be gone. The question is how far could we have moved towards addressing this issue in a 30-year span?
And have we gotten anywhere?
We have not really, no. I mean, by all accounts, South Africa's inequality has more or less remained stable over the last 30 years.
That's a sad state of affairs then, because the next question mark becomes, where do we go from here, and how do we then resolve it? What needs to be done, and is it just enough to just say government must?
Right. You know, I mean, one of the things that we did in our book is we look at multidimensional inequalities rather than just economic or labor market inequalities. And the state did do quite a bit of progressive things over the last 30 years. So, for example, if you look at electrification rates, it's gone up by more than double what it was 30 years ago. If you look at things like the proportion of people finishing school or even going to secondary school has gone up substantially for this generation compared to one generation ago. So in a number of non-economic measures, access to clean water, for example, as well, um, things which we believe are important for human development and for welfare, there has been progress. If you look at it purely in economic terms, in terms of income or in terms of employment rates, those have not really improved. And that's a mixed scorecard then, right? So the question then is, if you've got such an entrenched system of inequality and you've got this in multi dimensions, how do you deal with that? And it's very challenging. I don't think anyone has, as I've said already, a clear solution. But investing in the capacities and investing in people is almost surely a good thing. It's very hard to see how you'll ever solve it if you don't invest in people. Let's say it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's going to be about that continued investment, though, in order to get some of this done as well. And as you said, it's the same globally. Are we needing to find solutions that are specific, however, to our own country? Because there are many times where we talk about, oh, but this and this country is similar, and this and that country is similar, but not realizing that we have our own methodologies, our own ways, our own cultures, our own economic shifts, our own general shifts that need to be treated differently. Are we looking at those specifics to know that because we're a different place to the rest of the world, we have issues that we may need to deal with differently?
Yeah, you're asking me such hard questions for a Sunday morning. Yo. You know, I mean, on the one hand, you're right that we have a history which has some particular challenges. On the other hand, we are not that special in the sense that economies more or less work the way they work. So one of the kind of noticeable empirical statements you can make is that compared to many other countries of a similar level of income per capita or development more generally, our formal sector accounts for as much employment as most other comparable countries. What's different in the South African case, and remember our book was about sub-Saharan Africa, so we included studies from not just South Africa, but many other African countries as well. And one of the things that's striking about South Africa relative to other countries, both here and in Latin America for that matter, is our informal sector is tiny. In many other countries, they have a similar size formal sector, but the rest of the people work in either the informal sector or agriculture. And in South Africa's case, those two sectors, which are kind of the absorber of employment, is very small relatively.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that is peculiar or unique to South Africa, and it is one of the things that could be explored further, I think. And why they're so small and why we have these types of underdevelopment of particular sectors is, again, partly, at least partly, but perhaps even mostly for historical reasons.
A new book that traces the vicious cycle of inequality, particularly in African countries then as well. Professor Vimal Ranchhod, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it.